Hey Sarah, I've looked over your lesson plans and here is some feedback for you. In general, the lesson plans that you wrote here are very thorough. I feel like it's obvious to me that you really thought about not only what you wanted to teach the students, but how you wanted to teach it. Pardon me. And and what kinds of words and what kind of a teacher you want to be in front of your students. It comes off to me as very intellectual, very well paced. I like that you plan for a lot of wait time. I like that you plan for different arrangements of desks, different things like that. I mean, that stuff really speaks to a student that that they have a well thought through teacher who cares a lot about pacing the lessons appropriately for them. And so I'm really impressed by that. So let's go through some of the line by line, as it were. All right. So I've never seen someone do, curriculum map in the beginning of their lesson plans, but this is really nicely done. I like it. So you have that students are going to know claims and counterclaims. They're going to organize their thoughts and they're going to draft. Okay. So this is missing the revision phase on there. All right. And then your Bloom's taxonomy levels on here I find interesting. So you have level 1 creating, but the level that deals with creating is actually a level 5, a synthesis level. And then you have level 2 evaluating, but evaluating is actually the absolute top of the pyramid. It's a level 6. So level 3 is actually an application, and level 4 is analysis. So I'm not real sure which Bloom's taxonomies you're using here. Maybe you could bring that in. I mean, maybe it just doesn't align with what I know about it. So let's talk about that some. But in general, I really like that you're providing this overview so that it demonstrates to me that you have thought through a majority of the unit. Okay. So in your first lesson plan, I see, you've got 11th graders, 90 minutes. You're specifically scaffolding from a 10th grade to 11th grade structure. And I like that your essential global question carries throughout most of your lesson plans and that it directly relates to the text that you just had them finish reading. It's really nicely done, and so it provides a nice open problem solution academic essay for them. So I really like that. And then I like that your essential questions for the content area change, to meet each individual lesson. Okay. Your students will be able to, and your students will understand, are nicely aligned throughout all of them, actually. And so I really like that. Okay. So students have just finished reading a modest proposal. All right, so this hook, you lost me a little bit. It's just a little choppy, so you read Horton Hears a Who. You silently turn on the projector with the essential question. Then you say, can anyone summarize a modest proposal, which is a very content level question, after just providing them with a synthesis thinking skill. So you lost me a little bit in there. And then, so you want them to see that modest proposal is a satire piece. And then you move them to looking at the global question. So this is just a little bit choppy for me here, okay? Because you want me to do cross-application or synthesis here, and then you want me to back up and summarize content level here, but you don't really want a summary at content level. You want a summary that includes author's purpose, and then you move me to the global question, which is all about application and or synthesis. So if that makes sense, like what I'm seeing in here is very choppy. Okay, so let's see if we can't scaffold that a little bit more carefully, so that the students can kind of stair step with us. All right. So then you move on to, all right, when reasoning doesn't hold, ask students different questions. When reasoning doesn't hold up, move on, and then you put up the word claim. Okay, and then you tell them we're going to be writing a persuasive essay that makes and defends a claim. All right, what is a claim? This is here. By the way, this was the only piece of differentiation that I saw in your lesson plans. I'll watch for it as I'm going over the line by line, my voice grading right here. But but this is the only piece of differentiation I saw, okay? So you went over claim and then you went over counterclaim. All right, so a claim, right, it's strong, it's arguable. Hold on one sec. Harper, shh. I'm talking to Sarah right now. I'll play outside with you in just a minute. It just started snowing and she was mad about it because she thought it was going to rain, but now apparently she's excited about it. Sorry. Anyways, so you have them move on to a claim and reasoning. Okay. It took me a little bit to understand, by the way. Okay. So how can we as a society find a solution for unwanted children? Here's my claim. Here's my reasoning. It's, I was wondering if it was just going to take me a while, if I just missed it, if it wasn't in here. You don't have the students really doing any research. You know, this is a huge problem. What can we as a society, how can we find a solution for unwanted children? I get that they read the satirical piece, okay? But that was a satirical piece, obviously not an honest idea of what, you know, how to answer this question. And then you have them read Horton Hears a Who. Granted, they don't even come back to that. And that was obviously a comical cartoon piece, like an elephant saves them. And so when is the moment when they get to discuss this idea and do some research on it? Because it's a great question, but it's a huge question. I mean, there are economic impacts, there are medical impacts, there are government program impacts, schooling impacts, and that's just like off the top of my head. The thing I'm really getting at in here, Sarah, is that idea that when we're teaching our students something abstract, okay, claim and counterclaim, backing up with reasoning, all right, that's arguably abstract, okay? Remember that we need to ground it in the concrete as quickly as we can. So you introduce claim, you introduce counterclaim, and then you introduce this question. All three very abstract. Give them something concrete. In other words, have, I don't know, a 2, 3, 4 articles, you know, well written, like well thought through articles, not from the newspaper, you know, something substantial about different ideas that people have for finding a solution for unwanted children, and give that to the kids so that they have something really concrete to grab onto, someone else's ideas that they can go, yeah, I really like that, and here's why. Or like, oh my gosh, that's ridiculous. They totally haven't thought about the impact of blah, 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 blah. Okay? Give them something concrete. And that's really something that I was missing throughout this entire lesson plan. Okay? You give them time to write down the definition. And then you have them work in small groups to come up with claims. All right? So right here, you're like, hey, here's a big, huge question for you that you may not have thought a lot about before. And work together in your small group in the next 5 minutes and come up with both claims and counterclaims for it. It's just too much to ask without giving them anything grounded. Granted, these are 11th graders, and don't get me wrong, so I'm not saying they're stupid. I'm not saying they're slow. I'm just saying it's so abstract, and you know, working through a modest proposal with them is such an advanced piece of literature that they probably are going to get all caught up in the literature itself, you know, and the writing style and everything, that they may not have spent a lot of time thinking about the actual question that he's addressing in his essay. And even if they do spend time thinking about it, he addresses it satirically. He actually doesn't offer any real solutions to the problem that you're asking. Okay? So you give them 15 minutes to work in group graphic organizers, and I do really like your use of graphic organizers, and I appreciate the amount of detail you put in your lesson plans that, you know, here's exactly how you're going to organize students and keep everything going. Okay, the small group debates, debating and publicly speaking about their claims is an entirely another skill. You know, there's an entire K-12 spiral about communication and speaking that's separate from the writing spiral because the Common Core state standards and the Colorado academic standards acknowledge that speaking and publicly speaking at that in and of itself is its own skill. So having kids think about claims and counterclaims and back them up, back both of those sides up with reasons without ever having researched or possibly ever thought about this, and then telling them that they have to publicly announce those ideas to the class, it's just too high risk. You would need to back up and scaffold some information about debates, about publicly speaking, about presentation, about organization of ideas, different things like that. I mean, setting a class up for a small group debate is an entire unit plan in and of itself. I like the idea in general. I don't think it doesn't belong, but I think having a debate after the students have had a lot of opportunity to read, think, draft, revise, and practice. So like this would be a summative assessment, having a debate, okay? So now when we move in, I like your use of written reflections and homework, and that is working well. And then I move into another lesson plan here where I'm generating ideas. And I noticed that here in summative assessment, you'll have that they read a modest proposal and relate their reactions to the previous reading of Horton Hears a Who, but I actually don't see that addressed anywhere in the lesson plan, the Horton Hears a Who part. And so I don't know if I'm just missing a little something, but I didn't see it addressed. I really like this lesson plan because you're moving them from claims into thesis statements. I love that you have specific examples of thesis statements at different levels, that you explain what a thesis is, that you have different thesis statements, and that you have them think about them and discuss, bad, better, and best, I suppose. So this is a really well done lesson plan. Again, your level of detail in thinking about what you're going to say to the students and how you're going to say it to them is really good. It's impressive, and I like that. Okay, so then you have them think about a debate versus a claim. A debate being actively opposing sides and an ongoing use of a claim. But again here, if you're getting them ready towards a debate, you're going to have to ground this in something very concrete. Claim, counterclaim makes me think, white, black, up, down. It makes me think opposites, right? And so so what is my counterclaim? My claim is that, we should be responsible for, as a society, helping unwanted children. Oh my God, what's my counterclaim? No, we shouldn't help unwanted children? That's heinous. And I know you don't mean that at all, but I'm just thinking from a student's perspective, because what you really mean is problem solution. I think the best solution to this problem is whatever XYZ, and the counterclaim is that's really not the best solution because you forgot to consider LMNOP. But again, without a solid grounding in thinking about what a society does and what it should do for unwanted children, you're leaving your students hanging out in this really abstract area, and I think that it would be hard for them to get towards a strong thesis statement and a debate. Okay. So let's move through these pieces here. Okay. This one, you stopped pretty short because you said, you're going to put the students into groups. You're going to have them continue to work on different thesis statements, but it turned into a work day and you didn't know how to move it into a lesson that teaches drafting. So essentially what you turned in for me, Sarah, is idea generation on crack, right? And there isn't any actual drafting of an entire essay, and there isn't any revision in here either. So don't shy away from those things. Your thoughts in here are good. You want to mix up the concrete and the abstract, and don't be afraid that once they have a thesis and some a working thesis and reasons, a working counterclaim and reasons, don't be afraid to tell them, go ahead and draft. And Sarah, if that turns into a work day in class because the students you're thinking of aren't really strong when it comes to doing their homework, then so be it. Having them write in class is a good thing. That's one of the things we talked about. It does take time, but it's I think it's a good use of time. So you'll need to finish up this set of lesson plans with drafting and revising, and you'll see us continue to talk about that as we move through. But come talk to me. You know, if you don't feel like you can complete an entire set of lesson plans, come talk to me about how to do that and how to push forward in that. Okay, I've got office hours, and we can also schedule separate appointments to work on those things. Okay, thanks.